friends, Lee Brown here, and welcome back to My Kitchen, My Rules, which is frankly the cooking channel that you always dreamed of. It's got more commentary than food, but actually really good recipes from somebody that's just like you, not super fancy, as evidenced by my mess going on. And today I'm going to show y'all how to make my daddy happy. Now, I don't know if this makes yours happy or not, but this is my dad's very favorite thing. So I'll tell y'all the story as we go because you have to understand it. Now, I have my little handwritten recipe of this because this was my grandmother and my grandfather's recipe. They always made his apple jack pies together. And because they never wrote anything down and they kind of bickered a little bit in the kitchen while they were cooking, I stood by and wrote down every inch of what they said. So to make my dad's very favorite special treat, his fried apple jack pies, the first thing you need is dried apples. So I've got some from Tennessee that we got last year when we went up to the Great Smoky Mountains. I know where they're from. Be very careful with your dried apples, y'all, because a whole bunch of them are coming over from China. And I mean, that's fine. I love Chinese people, but I don't really know about buying dried produce from across the ocean, is all I'm saying. So we're going to put this whole bag in here. I've got 8 ounces worth. And there's a rule of thumb on these dried apples. It doesn't look like a lot, all right? They just look like it's not a gracious amount. How are we going to make anything with this, Lee Brown? That's just not enough. But let me show you. Even once I take them out of that vacuum sealed package, y'all, look, they're already starting to cover the bottom of my very nice Williams-Sonoma stock pot, which, by the way, this is like the best stock pot I've ever owned because you can't tear it up. Man, they're high, but sometimes it pays off. So the next thing you're going to have to do is cover this with cold water. You're going to bring the apples back to life, and this is the filling for your jack pies. So you've got to bring the apples back, and we're going to do it by covering them with a layer of cold water. So just enough water to get to the top. Now, by the way, say you don't have dried apples and you'd like to make your own, let me give y'all a quick tip. Go subscribe to other recipes where I've got tips, but this one I'm just going to bleed right in because I am so nice like that. So anyway, if you have regular apples, you can slice them into rings or whatever shape you want and put them in your oven at 200 degrees and just roast them until they're dry. That's it. So you can do it at home or you can buy store-bought because sometimes that's what we have to do. So now that we've got our apples, our dried apples covered in cold water, look, I mean, you need Dixie Crystal sugar. See, my grandmother used it. I use it. And I don't know what her grandmother would have used because they've only been around since 1917. So that will be before this time. And now you need sugar. And here's how much you need. You need half a cup of sugar for every 8 ounces of apples. Now, I happen to have 8 ounces of apples, so I only need a half a cup. We're going to make sure they're sweet. Those of y'all that don't want much sugar, apples can carry this by themselves unless you're using Granny Smith. Those are a whole different bucket entirely. And so now we're going to put this on stovetop and we're going to cook them until they're mush. And I know that's a technical term. And if you're from up north, I do not know what you're going to cook them down to, but cook them until they're mush. And sometimes you have to add a little bit more cold water in them. This is going to take a couple of hours. And so get this started. Make sure you have subscribed to my channel. You click like, mash like a few times if you like sugar, if you like Dixie Crystals, if you like apples, or if you know what mush means, hit the like button. And when we come back, I'll show you the next step in making the most special thing I can ever give to my dad. Okay, so the apples started on a boil and now we've got it down to a low heat. And you can see that the water is coming off, but they're not mush yet. So I want you to take some cold water and just add that in to make sure you've got your apples still covered up as they sit here on a medium-low heat and continue to cook down. So however long it takes is however long it takes. In my experience, it generally takes somewhere from a half an hour to an hour to get where you want it. But just keep adding cold water until they turn into mush. The next step for your fried apple jack pies is the dough. So our apples are still over here simmering away into mush. So now let's put our dough together. Now, full disclosure, y'all, Cora did not want me to give you this recipe. She felt like this should stay in the family and I shouldn't tell all my secrets. At which point I reminded her that if they would start cooking with me more, I wouldn't have to share all my family secrets with the interwebs. So the first thing you need is some white lily. Y'all know we don't use any other flour around here, especially for good Southern recipes, right? Self-rising. Make sure that today you're using self-rising and not all-purpose because it makes a difference. So this is how you know this came from my granddaddy. So he always made the dough and grandma did the filling and the frying. So you need 2 cups of self-rising white lily. But you notice I'm using my liquid container and not the dry container because this is how Papa measured it. He said you need to fill that 2-cup Pyrex to the top with white lily self-rising flour. So that's 2 cups and some. All right, so we're going to have 2 cups plus some, aka fill your 2-cup Pyrex to the top. Then we need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. We're using Clabber Girl today because that's what's in the cupboard. So let's get a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Sprinkle it around, y'all. That helps a lot. And make sure you're using teaspoons and not tablespoons. I think some of y'all might be challenged in paying attention, but I say that with love. And then you need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. But you know Lee Brown does not measure because you watched this trick before. That is a 1/4 teaspoon in the palm of my hand. And we'll spread that around to match my baking powder. And Shazam, that's in there. And now we need 3/4 cup of buttermilk. We're using Harris Teeter today. And I've never used low-fat buttermilk before, so I'm a little nervous about this. But it's all they had. I don't know why there was a run on buttermilk at the grocery store because we did have a winter storm. But usually that involves bread and milk and not buttermilk. So you need 3/4 cup of buttermilk. That's not nearly as thick as regular buttermilk. Lord, pray over these Jackpies that they come out right. But actually, Papa's recipe says to use 3/4 cup plus a little bit. So let's put in a little bit. All right. And then we need, let's dump that in here for our dough. We need 1/4 cup of canola oil, which I have vegetable oil, which is pretty much the same thing. You could use peanut oil. Just don't use the bacon grease out from under the sink. This is what we know. And his recipe says 1/4 cup and a little bit. All right, so there's a little bit. All right, so now that's our ingredients to make our dough. And we're going to stir that with a fork because like everything else when you're baking, friends, you don't want to overmix because if you overmix, it gets really, really tough. We want our dough to stay together because we're going to have to roll it out to cut these shapes for our jack pies. Now, those of y'all that are wondering, Lee Brown, what is a jack pie exactly? Well, they're kind of like dumplings, I guess, in some people's areas of the country. A little bit like the kolaches or whatever they make down in the Waco, Waxahachie part of Texas. But, basically it's just a fried apple pie is what some of y'all call them. But my grandma called them jack pies, and that's what my daddy called them. So this has got a little bit on the sticky side. That is not going to roll. So we are going to add a little bit of flour to it. And this is probably why Papa said everything was just a little bit and a little bit extra and this and that and the other, because you basically just keep adding a little bit of moisture and a little bit of flour until you have something that's holding together enough to roll it out. And so we'll roll this out on the countertop here in just a minute and roll it into nice circles that will hold our apples when they're done. And I believe if you ever want to find out if your dough is ready, you can always put a little bit in your hand and see if it's going to roll. Now, see, that is currently too sticky to roll. So we will add a little bit more flour to it, but not too much because remember, when you roll this, you're going to flour your surface, which keeps it from sticking to everything. So it's going to pick up a little bit more. So we're just going to massage it a little bit here until we get our dough to where it's going to roll. So let's get a wee tiny bit here and roll it. Now, see, there's how you know you got something you can roll. So it's still a little bit tacky, but I can spread it out, and that's what tells me this is going to be fine. So that's your testing mechanism. And now I'm going to have to pause our video to flour my countertop and move some of my ingredients out of the way. While I do that, y'all click like. I'll see you in 2 seconds. Okay, next step, and we've floured our countertop here while y'all were gone. Got my dough, I'm gonna dump it out of the bowl here. And then we got to roll it out. So some of y'all might have a fancy rolling pin, but I do not. What I have instead is a cold bottle of white wine. If you have a cold bottle of white wine in your fridge, this makes the best rolling pin ever because the cold helps your dough. Warm things don't work with dough, friends. If you're new to baking, not your friend. So that's what this bottle is. And in fact, there's something floating in the bottom. We don't even know what it is because I did not drink this wine. I don't know where it came from, to be honest. It's been in my refrigerator now for like 3 houses, and I guess that makes it better. So we're just going to make sure our dough is in one nice blob here. Again, I don't want to overwork it. Push it out with your hands a little bit. Let me see if I can move the camera a little closer because I know y'all like to watch the inner workings, and until I get a TV crew, this will have to work. So I'm going to kind of push it out a little bit on my floured countertop here. And you too can cook on your countertop as long as it's sealed, friends. And if you have a granite counter, the realtor in me is about to come out, look. Make sure that you seal it because granite by nature is a porous thing. And I've got these quartz countertops because they are non-porous. Okay, this dough is so freaking light. I can feel the air pockets in it. So now I'm going to get my cold bottle of wine and gently roll it out. See, now that is frankly also why I go to a massage person who can roll out the aggravations. Can y'all give an amen on that? Now, I was going to tell y'all one of the reasons that these are my daddy's favorite item and why I make it for his birthday. First of all, you've already noticed this is a multi-step process. This is far more labor intensive than most of what Lee Brown makes over here in My Kitchen, My Rules. But it's very important to take care of your family traditions. Make sure your kids know things, y'all, and make sure your grandkids know things. And in fact, a lady I'm friends with, she made a suggestion. What we need is Camp Grandma and Grandpa teach people how to do things again. So when my daddy served in Vietnam, he was, of course, missing his mama, and his mama missed him as much or more than he missed being at home. And this being my daddy's favorite food, my grandma knew that. And she would make a batch of these Jackpies and put them in one of those Christmas cookie tins, those round ones, and she would stock it full, and then she would duct tape it shut so that it could make it all the way to Vietnam. And Daddy would get it and have to hide it at the foot of his bed in his little locker, and he said that he would ration them out, and usually they shared everything in the barracks, but Daddy wouldn't share these because they were too precious to him. And sometimes they would grow mold because they had been there for a while. But when you're serving in Vietnam and you don't have access to your mama and to your favorite things, well, you just make do. And so he would take his pocket knife out and scratch the mold off and just relish them as long as he could. That's one of the reasons these are so precious in our family is the memories attached to them. So I'm just going to remind y'all that as you're cooking, remember that you want to build memories. And if somebody likes something, take a note. And in fact, in my grandmother's recipes, there are some notes on the side as to who liked what, which was her reminder to fix it when it was their birthday or some such. Now, if you have a cookie cutter, you want something that's about yay big to put the filling in, because we're going to have to seal it up around the edges. Now, I don't use a cookie cutter, I use a knife, but let me just show y'all about the size we're looking for here is about yay big. So about as big as my hand and a little bit, right? Everything my papa had, this and a little bit, hand and a little bit. Now this is probably not quite as thin as I would like. So I'm going to roll it a little bit further, but you don't want it too thin because this is the trick, y'all. It might take you a hot minute to figure it out. It's got to be thin enough to fry without the dough staying raw in the middle, but thick enough that the mushy apples don't go seeping out. So go ahead and get your dough ready and then click like. And when you come back, I will show you what it looks like before they go in the frying pan. Okay, now frankly, I do not know how I'm going to do this with one iPhone and one me. And I may have to pray for some special editing here. So now we're going to take this one that I have got a little bit thinner. So there y'all can see the edge. And actually, I'll hold it up here to the light a little bit. You can see that it's going to stretch a little bit. But you don't want holes in it, y'all. Holes would not be good for the frying part, all right? And actually, I just made a hole by stretching it too far. So now we've got our piece of dough here. Your apples, which are now a nice dark brown and mushy, put them right in the center. And you don't need a heck ton, all right? You put too many in here, and this thing's not going to stay shut, and it is not going to fry correctly. So it's maybe, what's that, 2 tablespoons of apple. And then we're gonna close it up. Now see, I'm not fancy. I'm not gonna use any kind of a crimping material. I'm gonna use my hands to crimp it shut. And then we've got something that looks quite ugly to some of y'all. You're like, Lee Brown, what are we doing here? Well, that's what it looks like raw, okay? So y'all have seen these in, the grocery store and stuff. But the apple's gonna come out the back side if we're not careful. So you see how we've got that thin place of dough there? I'm gonna try and patch that up before it goes in the frying pan, y'all, because it's gonna make a mess. I've got some extra dough here at the edge. Make a patch here. Looks like I'm on a pair of Goodwill overalls. There we go. All right. Got a little patchwork going in there. Now, that's what your dough and your apple jack pies look like before they go in the good stuff. Now, the next thing we've got to do, now you're gonna be putting your jack pies together, and we need our pan to go here. We need a medium heat. So I'm between 4 and 5 here. You need to have enough oil in it to cover the bottom. And yes, this is a super healthy recipe. I'm glad y'all figured that out. Now, the amount of oil that you need enough that it's going to fry them, so you need to cover the bottom of the pan. Let me show you that. However much more that is. I'm using my big deep Calphalon. I could also use my cast iron skillet for this, but I'm using my big Calphalon because frankly I've got more room to operate in it. You're going to let your oil heat up until it starts to shimmering. You need it to be shimmering so that when you put these things in, the oil's already hot, but not too hot. Right? See, it's hard to cook Southern because there's so much that's not technical about it. So while the oil's heating up, I'm going to make a couple more jack pies. And as soon as it's hot, I will show you how to cook them. And friends, you should probably in the meantime be getting you some vanilla ice cream ready because that's the best accompaniment. See you in a second. Okay, so my oil is shimmering. And here comes the hard part. And friends, if you're scared of hot oil, then just know that you need to have a couple of paper towels nearby and wear your apron. You notice I'm wearing my apron today because not only are we using Dixie Crystal sugar, we need an apron because we have oil going. All right, let's make sure y'all can see that because I know y'all like to watch things in action. Now, part of the thing with the self-rising flour is these things are going to rise a little bit, but you don't want raw dough. So please forgive all my wild camera angles here, y'all. I'm honestly trying to figure it out. All right, let me get my flipper here so I am ready because we're going to flip them when they start to turn brown. Now, the first time you're starting your pan up with that nice shimmery oil, and notice I'm sitting on right at the medium high heat, but not high, definitely not high. But keep an eye on these bad bears so they don't get burnt. And they'll solidify a little bit. Now, when you have apple that leaks out, that's okay. Don't stress out. I see I've got a hole in the dough here. I'm not going to stress out. I'm going to flip it and cook it. Be fine. Kind of look under the edges. Oh, golly, that's so pretty. All right, so these are about a minute away. So really be only cooking the frying pan for 3 or 4 minutes, and they'll be good to go. And then what you'll do is have your next batch ready so that as you rotate them through, that oil can stay hot. Now, if your oil starts to change colors, then you will want to refresh your oil. And I got to lean this thing in here so y'all can see how beautiful that is. That is the right color. Do you see that beautiful golden brown? Yes, honey, yes. And you see they're getting fat. Now, that's the beauty of making sure that the dough is the right depth, because with the self-rising, when they get fat and this color of brown, you want to make sure the dough is cooked. So get yourself a couple of batches going. I mean, it'll take you half a day, but oh, it's so worth it. So you'll see some more finished product here in just a minute. Click like for me, okay? Well, I don't know if it's y'all or that oddball low-fat buttermilk, but these are the prettiest jack pies I've ever made. They're perfect. Go make some for your family. Enjoy it. And make sure you subscribe to my channel and click like. And by the way, if you need some actual supper to go with these desserts, I've got plenty of easy main entrees for you too. So I'll see you next time.